Hello, everyone. Welcome back to season 3 of Verifiably Random, where we share some awesome stories and deep dives into Algorand's ecosystem, applications, and founders. Stick around until the end because each episode also features an update from our head of DeFi, Fred Estante. I'm Mark van Lerberg, head of strategy and marketing at the foundation, and today I'm joined by Tasos Bitsios, the head of our core engineering team, also better known in the community as D13. Hi, Tasos.
Indeed. Hey, very nice to be here.
So, we're going to have a very interesting episode today, and it's going to be a very technical episode. So, I'm going to just have to sharpen my pencil and see if I can follow everything that Tasos says. We're going to make it very technical. We're going to talk about Algoland, but Algoland from a technical perspective. Like, Algoland as a campaign ran completely on chain. So we're going to go deep into like what did we actually do? Why did we do this on chain? What did we learn from it? And in the end, we're going to talk about like what can other people do with the code that was created. So very excited about doing this technical deep dive. So maybe before we get started and go deep, maybe we'll just do a quick summary of what this campaign was all about. So Algoland was a campaign that was launched beginning of October, end of September, beginning of October. And the whole idea behind the campaign was to attract users to Algorand and let them experience the diversity of projects and apps that are available on chain. So the campaign was split into 13 weeks. Every week was a themed challenge, for instance, DeFi week or NFT week or prediction market week. And so within each week, every consumers and users would complete multiple quests. And if they complete all the quests within a certain week's challenge, they would be eligible for a random prize drawing at the end of the week. They could earn points by completing quests. They can also earn points by referring people. And at the end of the 13 weeks, there would be a distribution or a drawing for the grand prizes. And so as people, complete more quests or refer more people, they gather more points. And as a result of that, they have a higher chance and a higher probability of winning the end prize. So that's more or less how the campaign was structured. We ended the campaign at the end of December. We had about close to 80,000 people participating in the campaign. And so overall, it went quite well. And what was the most exciting piece for me about this campaign was that we saw a significant uptick in number of users from a project perspective. So, for instance, Alpha Arcade noticed that they really saw a significant uptick in users that really set them on a faster growth trajectory for them. And so, for most of these projects, and Tassos, I think you correct me if I'm wrong, but for most of these projects, I think they saw an uplift of 5x to 9x in terms of weekly usage. So, and that's ultimately what it was all about. It was all about getting our apps more users and driving usage of the different core apps that the Algorand ecosystem had. So that's a quick summary. Hopefully I did a good job at explaining that. Let's go into the details. So all of that stuff, basically all the drawings and everything, like what did we do on chain? So we had this campaign website, and of course the campaign website is hosted somewhere off chain. But tell me, what are like the core components that were running on chain?
Yeah. So Algoland was basically an exercise in scaling performance and developer experience, and this was somewhat. There was a complexity that was somewhat self-inflicted. So when your department initially asked for engineers' input into this project, you basically just wanted the backend part, which is the quest tracker, tracking user transaction in order to trigger completions of a specific quest, as well as the VRF parts. But generally, my mentality as a foundation developer is that we need to be using the chain as much as possible. And so some other aspects that we were initially going to track just in a database, I thought that with how mature our tooling is and how well we can use it as well, that we could actually just do almost all of it on chain instead. And so Algoland, the Algoland system is a number of different projects, and at the core of it are the three smart contracts. One being the first being the registry, which actually tracks all of the users, the referrals, the points, and implements some complex business logic about how this all is going to work. As well as two other contracts for the weekly draws and the grand prize draws. That I believe that I'm fairly certain that the grand prize was the largest VRF selection that has happened on chain by a factor of like 10 or 20, something like that. So we had 152 users. And that particular one was variable odds as well. So the more points you had, the more odds you had of actually winning it. Yeah.
For the record, I just want to say that from a marketing perspective, we only asked for the VRF drawing. Everything else was an engineering
And the quest tracker and the quest tracker, which is quite significant. We're gonna get to that as well.
So the bottom line is that basically all of the business logic for this campaign was running on chain, not just the random drawing, for which we of course used the Verifiably Random function, but also all the business logic in terms of the registration of the users, the collection of the points, management of all these points, like turning on, turning off quests, the timing of that, like the weekly drawings, everything, the entire business logic pretty much was running on chain, correct?
Even creating the assets, what happened in the contract itself, it was operationally more simple than creating it off chain and opting it in and sending it around. So we did a lot of things on chain. If I had to do it again, I'd probably do a few more things. So we have a bit of a lessons learned in this as well. Some challenges and realities of the project were also interesting in that, for example, the team that built the front end was a partner creative agency called Blockhouse, which had never really done any Algorand stuff before. And so we needed to find a way so that they can consume data from the smart contracts and construct transactions to enroll into the campaign or claim a price that is as simple as possible without them having to know any Algorand specific stuff or worse yet about the internal structure of our smart contracts. And so one fairly big part of Algoland was actually the SDK. So this is built on top of the AlgoKit generated clients, and it offers a very easy way to either get on-chain data for the state of Algoland, think user points or challenges or quests and referrals, as well as constructing transactions for many roles, not just for the public, but for ourselves to run the VRF. Everything goes through the SDK. Even the smart contracts test themselves use the SDK to test the smart contracts.
So it's interesting to me. It's interesting to me when you think about the fact that we have this front end that, of course, is a Web2 front end, really, but it basically is a whole blockchain behind it. How do you ensure that that's pretty much invisible to the user? My understanding is, like, even though Algorand is very fast, it is still slower than a regular database. So if you're kind of pulling data from a blockchain in real time, and you have to, how do you make sure it doesn't slow down everything?
Yeah. Not only that, but also something that in Web3 in general we tend to overlook a lot is error handling. And very often when you trade off the happy path on EVM, for example, you might see some errors about nonsense. And to the user, that's nonsense. Like, what, this doesn't mean anything to me. And so part of what we really focused on in the SDK is that when one of these expected errors happen, like you don't have enough balance or you're trying to claim a price that doesn't exist, so maybe you claimed it again, we actually translate that from like the normal technical scary algo D error message with numbers and bytecode. We translate that into natural English, and so the user will read a natural English explanation of what went wrong and usually a recommendation about how to try to address it. So this is also part of the SDK, and we hope that by the end of the month, we're going to open source everything about Algoland, and some of the patterns that we use will hopefully be useful for other dApp developers on Algorand as well.
That's great. That's great. So tell me a little about the kind of the limit. How do you deal with the limitations of a blockchain? Because I think smart contracts can only have a maximum size. If you store users, how do you even store 80,000 users? Like, the storage is also quite limited. So how did you get around all of these things?
Yeah. So there were two hard limits that kind of defined the development on Algoland of Algoland. One was known in advance, and I'll speak a little bit about this first. So the largest data structure that we can use on chain to persist some state is called a box, and the largest possible value there is 32 kilobytes. So with the requirement that we wanted to facilitate up to 100,000 participating users, and with the requirement that at the end there's going to be a grand prize VRF draw involving all of them with variable odds, you can see already that it's not going to fit at all. So in order to facilitate that, we had to basically break up this list of. Actually, I might make a brief intermission here to explain how VRF usually works, because we talk about VRF, and I don't know that most users actually understand how that works. So leaving the internals of the VRF aside, when we need to make a selection of between a number of let's say accounts or users, what basically every implementation does is we order our choices in as a list, and then we use the VRF to just pick a number as an offset or in that list. So if we had 6 people, you could think that we would maybe order them alphabetically and then throw a fair die, and we're all 4, and so it's a fourth user that's going to win. And this is basically the methodology that we had to use, except we didn't have anywhere to store a list of potentially 100,000 users in one place.
And just for the users, that the people that listen to this podcast, just to put it in the right context, the VRF is kind of the crown jewel of the Algorand consensus mechanism, right? It is what makes the entire consensus mechanism so fast and so elegant, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So this is a slightly different use case, but basically the VRF allows for consensus to coordinate with itself between different participants without really communicating. So this is well outside of the current the scope of the current conversation. But we also have a variant of VRF that is available to any application developer. And the way that this usually works is that the smart contract will commit ahead of time and say that whatever the VRF output is in 10 rounds time, I will use that as the die cast that we said before in order to pick my winner. And so before this value is generated, it's unpredictable. So this is a way to say that, this is going to be a fair draw, and we're not basically cooking the result to give it to our friends or to ourselves. Yeah. And so in order to fit all of the users in a single place, we had to split this up into multiple boxes. And this is generally a requirement that other people might have as well. And so both for our own benefit and for the benefit of the ecosystem, we completely isolated this feature of basically treating multiple boxes as a single one. And we developed this as a library called Superbox. So this is written for Algorand TypeScript. And it is what we used internally in order to create a huge list of user IDs that we would then pick an offset of the list and say that this is the weekly winner or this is the grand prize winner. So we used it in different ways for the weekly prize and the grand prize because they had different requirements. But one of the benefits to the development ecosystem that we can give back is a way for anyone to basically use the same library, the same abstraction, and have an infinite quote unquote list of elements backed by multiple boxes. The second limitation we hit has to do with an AVM limitation. That's a hard limit. So a smart contract on the AVM can only grow up to 8 kilobytes in size. There's no way around it. I hope that we will actually increase that because a number of people have hit this limit already. And I should say that it's not the easiest thing to hit this limit, but the registry contract did quite a lot of things, and so in a very spectacular fashion as well. So just a week before it was, we were slated to go live. So everything's announced as well. Everything's counting down. On the Wednesday specifically, before the Monday that we were going to launch, the weekly draw functionality was developed in a branch, like separately from everything else. And after it looked like all good, and we're going to merge it in, it suddenly exploded, so to speak, because when I tried to compile the smart contract and then deploy it to localnet so that we could test, it was over 8 kilobytes. So that was a little bit of a hair-raising moment where it was easy enough. It was basically just a day's work to split out this functionality into a separate contract. But this is something that happened yet again towards the end. So it's probably worth saying that Algorand was a ship of Theseus in the sense that it was developed as things went along. We had 28 different dApps, and we had a requirement to track 57 distinct types of transactions. And so development started in mid-July, and we launched in mid-September. So there was, absolutely not enough time to have all of the functionality of Algoland, including every single dApp and Quest configuration ready to be tracked when we launched. And so we were keeping up as it evolved, both in the Quest configurations, but also some of the features. The grand prize was actually finished in January of 2026.
Right. And you also had to track, I mean, because you're tracking all the points and all the referrals, you also basically had to track the activity on every single dApp that was participating, right? So you had to kind of work with every single dApp in our ecosystem to kind of figure out and figure out how to track the activity on their dApps, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's yet another fairly large part of Algoland, and hopefully a somewhat usable one. It was also part of the initial requirements, as we said at the top. And basically, the way that worked is that when you initially reached out to ecosystem companies to ask, like, how do you want to participate, they came up with a list of required steps that users would have to take in their projects. And then the engineering teams would ask for, what does this look like on chain? So every single request had to have an on-chain footprint in order to be able to be tracked by our system. And so we would then go look at this transaction and using the AlgoKit subscriber TypeScript, which is a software made by the AlgoKit team to follow the blockchain and have some configurations of filters that you are matching, that you are looking for. And when transactions are found that are matching these filters, they will execute some code for you. So at the heart of the backend Quest tracker is a AlgoKit subscriber. And we had to do 57, I think, different configurations in order to track, various ecosystems on-chain activity. There was also a lot of back and forth with kind of a technical support. This is about as complicated as it sounds. And not only that, but, transactions on Algorand can also be complicated. So we had a lot of situations where, for example, dApp might have given us like the exactly correct transaction to match, but they failed to mention that, sometimes this is actually an inner transaction. So there's a contract that then does this, but not always. So that it's always fun to run something at this scale, because you launch it on Monday and you're seeing numbers come in, go up, so it looks like it's working. But then there's like a critical mass of people going, hey, I completed, it's not working. Hey, I completed, it's not working. So whatever you thought you had to do on Monday evening, it's like suddenly, okay, we need to sort that out. Like, go figure out which transactions we didn't track. And
So you definitely kind of push the boundaries of what is possible on a blockchain. And so, from your perspective, what are some of the key kind of learnings from that experience that other developers can use?
yeah, I don't know that we pushed the boundaries of blockchain in general, but we did push against the boundaries of some of our DX tools. I think we had some hard limits, like the two aforementioned ones with the box size and the 8 kilobyte program page. But we also hit some soft limits, basically, where it was possible to do the thing that we're trying to, but it was more complicated than it had to be. And throughout this development, we basically get a backlog of issues and potential improvements that we then worked with the AlgoKit team and hopefully shaped the next version of AlgoKit utils V10 into a more flexible and powerful library.
I mean, you talked about like you built an SDK to kind of one of the things you did, if I'm understand correctly, you built an SDK that makes it easy to interact with smart contracts. For instance, I would assume that the use case for that would be broader than just what you've built for Algorand.
So this is a pattern, and it's not immediately applicable to anyone else because it's tailored to the Algoland smart contracts. But I'm personally a big fan of basically taking the output of AlgoKit, which is a generated client that can already do some low level and basic stuff around transaction creation and state getting, but then wrapping it into basically an almost idiot-proof way of interacting with your smart contracts. So the less your user or the developer who's going to be interacting with your stuff needs to know about how you do things, the better. And also, it's a stable interface so that if you then need to change something internally, you can keep the same facade to the consumers of your SDK and just make your changes just internal without breaking anything else. So the SDK took quite a lot of effort, and we brushed up against some limitations of the current generated clients. Uh, the 8 kilobytes program size limit led us to having to use multiple contracts, but multiple contracts led to multiple generated clients. And if you're using some complex features, then multiple generated clients do not really mix together very well. So we had to basically come up with a new way to do op-ups, which is a way to get more computational budget on chain. So there was, I think the SDK is a very good place to at least take inspiration and patterns from. This is where we also had the error map that I mentioned before, where we detect specific error codes or conditions and translate them into natural English.
So to me, the interesting thing here as well is that if you think about this, like the entire um, campaign and the user experience was actually built by our partner Blockhouse. Blockhouse didn't know anything about the blockchain or how to kind of develop for a blockchain, and they were able to create this entire compelling user experience without really knowing in details how a blockchain works. And so being able to kind of abstract those complexities for kind of Web 2 builders, to me, feels like is something that's really important and that potentially could be generalized. It reminds me of what we did with World Chess too. Like with World Chess, built the entire loyalty program and is using Intermezzo as a way to kind of abstract. And Intermezzo kind of abstracts away the complexity of blockchain as well. So is there like a pattern here? Like, is there a way that we can kind of start generalizing these tools in such a way that we make it easier for people that come from a Web 2 environment to build interesting stuff on chain without having to know the details of how a blockchain works?
Yeah, 100%. I'm generally a very big fan of creating as easy of an experience as possible, both for developers who consume your SDK and ultimately for the end users that will be using the final product. So the Algoland SDK specifically is quite opinionated, as are some decisions in the contract itself, such as throwing custom error codes and some other stuff. Most of this will be written up and published when we open source the repo. But generally, another very good and somewhat unexpected benefit of the SDK is that with a straightforward SDK, LLMs can really work around that. So there are two auxiliary components of Algoland that I can mention briefly. One is an API server, and basically an LLM wrote 98% of that. It is really simple, but still, like it basically took the SDK. I told it what kind of data that we needed to expose, and it just basically wrote a Cloudflare workers wrapper with a Hono framework. And so this is what we used for the Galaxy Quest integration. They wanted just a RESTful endpoint that.
So Tasos, are you telling me you vibe coded Algorand?
Oh yeah, no, I'm telling you, I've coded as a part of Algoland, two to be precise. So the management interface that I'll get to better, and the API server. So the API is just read only, so there isn't very much potential there for things to go wrong and people to lose their funds. And so, yeah, Claude definitely helped write the boilerplate around serving the SDK data over HTTP API. This is what Para used in order to fetch points and show the users. Go Plausible also use this for their own Quest implementation. And Galaxy used this in order to differentiate which users that they refer to us had completed the enrollment quest. And the second part is something that grew to be called the management interface. So this was developed early on, also vibe coded, because I didn't actually think that it would last until the end of the campaign, but it proved to be useful in different ways. So this was a dashboard that showed you basically Algoland's state, which challenges exist, what are their various parameters like the time start, the relations to quests. For users, you could see referrals, points, like basically everything. And we also use this for the Blockhouse team to be able to test some different things before they had built up their own site. And this was also largely basically the skeleton, and a lot of it was done with an LLM. And because a high-level SDK like the one that we produced will give you very reasonably and nicely typed objects and methods, and it can figure things out a lot better than if you just have the generated client and a much broader API and namespace that you would get as you're developing. So you're kind of narrowing it and making it a lot more specific, and that actually works pretty well with LLMs as well. So yeah, my confession is that the API server and the management interface had a very large percentage of contributions from Cloud Code.
So, the question. So if you know, there's always this conversation about like, what is a blockchain good for, right? Is it, and it's not because something can be done on a blockchain, therefore it should be done on a blockchain. I mean, databases are pretty good at what they do. So it's not, because we have a blockchain that therefore we should replace all database activity. So what would you say to that? Like, why would it make sense to run a campaign like this on chain versus using a traditional database?
Okay, so for us, one additional benefit is that we would do this work and it wouldn't go to waste, so to speak, because we would be able to produce some artifacts that would contribute to the ecosystem. But most people are not the foundation, so they don't have this extra incentive. Um, the reason we use blockchain is basically for transparency and to eliminate trusted intermediaries. If we were tracking points and referrals and all of that in some centralized database, would basically be in complete control of the campaign and the outcomes. You could go and claim that we have 10 million users, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. The way we did it, it's not like completely trustless in the sense that we had to be able to upgrade the contracts as we built more functionality into them, but it's still permanently recorded, and especially already with the SDK being published, but even more so when we open source the repository, and you can see every different state of the smart contracts initial source code. You can see exactly what happened, and this goes all the way to the weekly and then the grand prize draw executions.
So you can basically now run completely transparent sweepstakes, which is something that has never been done before, is the bottom line.
I don't know that whether it's never been done before or not, but we definitely kind of went above and beyond in being able to actually like show our hand and explain how these things happen. So the aforementioned management interface, I kind of intentionally deployed it to the algoland.co domain. So it's ngmt.algoland.co. And we never announced it, but I was certain that the community would find it. Because when you deploy something on a subdomain and then it gets a TLS certificate, like the HTTPS little icon requires a certificate to be issued. And nowadays, when certificates are issued, this goes into some public logs called the certificate transparency logs. And you can basically look up most subdomains for most sites. And in fact, a couple of weeks, I think, after ngmt.algoland.co was created, someone from the community found it. I think it was probably through certificate transparency logs. and it was shared, and people could see the data, which was semi-intentional, but at the same time we didn't
Yeah.
have to brand it properly and so on. So as part of the management interface, in the past few weeks, we've added transparency pages for both the weekly draws and the grand prize draws. So these would show you exactly how we to throw back to the serialization ordering of your options into a list. We show you exactly how for every weekly draw we take the eligible users, we order them by assigning user ID, and then we commit to a future round, and then we take an output, and this is how it gets translated to exactly who won that prize. And the ground prizes are a little bit different because variable odds, but more or less the same thing, and a different set of transparency pages for the grand prize draws again.
To me, it's another example of like how Algorand is really designed for real world scale, right? Like there's probably very few other blockchains that could have done this at this level of scale as we have done it here.
Yes, and um, one of the it was a bit of a risk, but not too much, to say that no, we're gonna do more stuff on chain. We're gonna do the entire business logic effectively of the campaign. We're gonna do that on chain. So the risk there was that I knew it could be done, but before doing it, I couldn't necessarily have guessed that can be done on time, can be done easily enough. And we also decide to dog food Algorand TypeScript. So dog fooding is when you use your own products before they, as a startup, for example, you might use your own products in order to figure out how to make them better. So when Algoland was development started in July, Algorand TypeScript was still as a release candidate. The stable version was not out yet. But one of the extra benefits of doing it, we chose to do it in Algorand TypeScript so that we can, use the language, have an open source artifact of some hopefully good code that's using it, and also give feedback for the Algoland TypeScript project itself.
Great. So what's next? How can people find the code? How can people kind of check out the code and see what's in it and how they can use it?
Next, we need to find a bit of time to actually document and clean up and open source. I hope to have it done by the end of the month. And there's a Superbox library that I mentioned already that's been published as I believe it's an NPM module under my personal account, so d13co/Superbox. And you can already use that to, in the same way that we did for Algoland. There's a few more operational stuff to be done on Algorand itself. So we're going to be executing a second grand draw, as some of the initial winners were deemed to be ineligible because they had multiple entries from a single account. But this is something that we had planned for. And so we have the ability to rescind the prize and then start a new grand prize draw, which again, it's fully transparent, and you can see exactly what we're doing and and why and so on.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up. So if you're a developer and you want to understand and how all this works and you want to use it in your projects, make sure to you follow AlgoDevs on X because we're going to communicate there
Good follow.
as soon as the code is open sourced. And anyways, it's a good idea always to follow AlgoDevs on X for everything that has to do with development on Algorand. So Tasos, thank you so much for joining me in this super interesting episode, deep dive in Algoland. And so before we close, I want to welcome Fred Estante, our head of DeFi, to this podcast, who's going to give us an overview of everything that happened over the past week. Hi, Fred.
Hey, Mark. It is a pleasure to be here once again. Thank you so much. What an incredible chat with Tasos. This whole endeavor was just super exciting. Very, very nice to hear more about this. But all right, let's jump directly into the ecosystem news. Starting, of course, with DeFi. Tinyman recently announced some adjustments to the fees in the liquidity pools, raising them by 6 basis points. So now the total fees on the LPs are 0.36%. Haystack now allows you to track all of your trades and positions in the app, in the browser with the PNL. So you can see whether you're doing good or bad, in all of your trading activities out there. Folks Finance added Folks token to the isolated lending market, bringing more utility to the token. And they also announced that token holders now also get discounts when using the Folks router. So that's great utility for the token. Alpha Arcade finally purchased the Alpha Arcade X handle. So right now they're under a new username, a new handle on X. So just make sure to watch out for that. And they also recently reached $1 million of daily volume in the platform and teased a lot of interesting things. They have upcoming support for payments with credit cards, with Apple Pay. They also teased centralized exchange listings, wormhole entity integration, and a lot more. The team is on fire, very excited to see what they're going to be building next. On the gaming side of things, Ghetto Pigeons launched the Ghetto Warzones game on Google Play Store, which is really fun. It's picking up good traction. The Realms team also shared lots of updates, with the fighter game being launched. UBI and Nico staking also start in early February, and the virtual world game is probably going to launch between May and June in that time frame. And moving on to a little bit of more infrastructure news, Braille is now integrated with Algorand for stablecoin issuance, which is a great integration by our partnerships team. Outbridge is also integrated with Algorand, allowing for super easy and fast cross-chain stablecoin bridging. So it's very easy and fast to bring your stablecoins from other chains into Algorand. Loot Wallet added experimental Falcon support for all of you trying to play around with the post quantum account on Algorand. Transaction Lab released Use Wallet v4.4.0 with lots of updates for developers out there. Really great stuff. Nice job, team. Para Wallet also released several app updates with lots and lots of improvements and quality of life upgrades, especially in the web view performance. But go update your apps if you haven't. It's always great. Lots of updates there in the last couple of weeks. And at last, but certainly not least, Lofty AI, they finally received the trademark for the brand after 4 years of battles. Jerry shared a lot of background on that story. It's very nice to follow, but congrats to the team for finally getting their trademark. And they also just launched some interesting platform updates, specifically to limit orders. So now they're even more efficient and even better for execution. So a lot happening in our ecosystem in the last 2 weeks. This is just a short, a quick overview of it, but there's a lot more happening every single day. So Mark, thank you so much for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to be here. And back to you. See you next time. Cheers.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Tasos, and thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. And I'll see you guys pretty soon on Verifiably Random.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Take care.